Hey y'all, welcome to Sandy's Library. I'm Sandy, and in this video I'm going to read some more of my book, If I Had Married You. And just as a quick reminder, this is not a professional production. This is simply an author reading her book. So, let's get started. Chapter 16. A couple of weeks after Steve's funeral, Samantha came through our back door with a suitcase in hand. I was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher. Going somewhere? I asked. She dropped her suitcase on the floor near Junior's high chair, which he was still occupying. I'd just finished feeding him breakfast. I can't stay in that house anymore, she said, rubbing her still flat belly. Every time I turn around, all I see is Steve, except he's not really there. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. Can I stay here until I figure out where I'm going to go? I went to Samantha and pulled her in my arms. Of course you can stay here, for as long as you want. My cousin moved into our guest room that day and put the remainder of her furniture in storage. She was a great comfort to us both during the remainder of your stint in Korea. I had company while you were away, and you took comfort in knowing I wouldn't be alone during the last trimester of my pregnancy. I was due in late July, another 3 months away. Once the baby was born, it'd be another 3 months at least until you came home. So much time would pass, and there was so much that you would miss out on. Thank goodness for the camcorder that our parents bought us while we were in Hawaii. It was the only way you'd get to see snippets of some of what you'd missed. When Samantha was 16 weeks along, she had an ultrasound that confirmed she was having a girl. There would be no Jason Stevens Jr., and I found that incredibly sad. You called a few days after Samantha had the ultrasound. I remember wanting desperately to talk to you when the phone rang. I answered it with optimistic caution, so I wouldn't be let down if it turned out to be one of the wives wanting to know why her husband hadn't called her in 2 weeks. As you know, I dealt with that sort of thing a lot. I said to the phone, "Hello. How's pregnancy central, you ask?" At the sound of your voice, my heart thudded wildly against my chest. "Hey, soldier." I let my greeting trail off in hopes of gaining some control over my emotions. I was definitely feeling the late pregnancy pangs. They were stretching my already thin nerves. "It sure is good to hear your voice," I said. "How's my girl?" you asked. "Fat," I said with a laugh. "I don't believe it," you said. "You looked incredibly sexy in that video you sent last week." "That's very kind of you to say," I said in a gentle tone. At my doctor's appointment the day after, while I was waiting to be seen, I heard a woman say to her friend that her husband had told her she was getting fat. She was about 5 months pregnant. Lord, what was he going to say when she hit 8 or 9 months? It's little things like that that gave you more and more pieces of my heart until you'd taken over the entire thing. You said, "How's Junior?" I sighed. "Baby, he's growing up so fast. He's still missing his daddy, though. And I miss him almost as much as I miss his mother." Your voice reached across the wire and wrapped me in comfort. I sighed heavily. Then you asked, "How's Samantha?" I laughed then and said, "Getting a little baby bump, which reminds me, she's having a girl." "Oh, that's wonderful," you said. "Considering that," I said, "I was thinking, what if we name our boy Jason?" It took you a second or two to respond. When you did, you said confidently, "Darling, I think that's a wonderful idea." It was settled. We would name our son Jason Lewis after Samantha's husband and my father, just as soon as he got here. On the morning of July 20th, a little over a month after Junior's first birthday, I went into labor. Samantha was with me and 7 months pregnant herself. My mother and Aunt Helen were there too. They had arrived on the 15th. My aunt had tagged along because, well, Samantha was her daughter. I guess back then we were all worried about Samantha. Losing the love of your life while you're pregnant with his child, I couldn't imagine. Wouldn't even consider trying to imagine what that was like. I just keep remembering all the times that Samantha has said, if I hadn't been pregnant when Steve died, I doubt I'd be here now. Their baby saved her life. I was thankful that she didn't have to go through what we went through during our first pregnancy. That would have been the cruelest twist of fate. Anyway, the morning of the 20th, my mother had brought me a breakfast tray in bed. I hadn't been feeling quite right since the night before, and it had nothing to do with the fact that she'd been babying me since she arrived. The eggs, bacon, toast, bowl of fresh fruit, and hot tea should have been right up my alley. But as I looked at the tray, I couldn't get enthusiastic about any of it. I just didn't feel like eating. Okay, my mom said, placing the tray on the dresser. She turned her back on me, crossed her arms in front of her, and said, why don't you get up and go to the bathroom, take a shower if you feel like it? Getting up didn't sound like fun, but I knew it was a good idea. With a measure of bitterness, I tossed the covers back and dragged my legs over to the edge of the bed, where I grudgingly pushed myself up. My due date was in a couple of days, and I was really tired of being pregnant. Of course, as soon as I sat up, I had a certain urge to go to the bathroom. I wasn't thinking straight. I was miserable. I felt fat. I missed you. And I just wanted this to be over. And then I saw blood on toilet paper and I freaked out. My mom stormed into the bathroom asking, what's wrong? I told her what happened in a too much overdramatic tone, I'm sure. My mother simply chuckled and said, that's your mucus plug, dear. Of course it was. I felt like an idiot. Does this mean we're going to have a baby soon? I laughed at myself. That's exactly what it means, she said. My mom and Samantha went with me to the hospital while Aunt Helen stayed at the house to take care of Junior. At 4:12 p.m., Junior made his appearance into the world, weighing 8 pounds and 8 ounces. He was 21 inches long and a spitting image of his big brother, save the eyes. Jason was blessed with your beautiful coffee brown eyes. The only thing missing was you. Chapter 17. The first couple of months of Jason's life were filled with days of me taking video of him and Junior so you could see all that you'd missed. It hurt to watch both boys grow and change, knowing that you weren't there to witness it. I did my best to document it for you. To your credit, you were always grateful for my efforts. On September 18th, Samantha gave birth to Alicia Lynn. A couple of days after she brought her home, you called. Both Jason and Alicia were crying when the phone rang. Hello, I said while bouncing Jason gently. Hi, baby, he said. Sounds like you've got your hands full. Are both boys crying? No, but I was happy to report Samantha had her baby, I said, on Friday, 7 pounds, 9 ounces, and 20 inches long. Then I chuckled before saying, spitting image of Steve. Oh yeah? Let me talk to her. I handed the phone to Samantha. She talked to you for all of 20 or 30 seconds, then started to cry and handed the phone back to me. Sorry, babe, I said into the phone. Emotions are still running high around here. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make her cry, he said. I know, and so does she. I sandwiched the phone between my shoulder and ear. Jason was finally quieting down, like he knew the significance of a phone call from you, his father. I said into the phone, so how are you? Anything new going on? The only thing wrong with me, darling, is that I miss you and our sons. There was an ache in your voice, but it didn't cause me concern. I also heard your confidence. I wasn't worried about you anymore. Somehow I knew you'd come back to me. I almost sighed as I said, and we miss you too, babe. A brief bit of silence settled between us. long enough for me to start feeling the seed of worry sprouting to life in my gut. I said, "Why do I get the feeling there's more?" "Maybe because there is," you said with a bit of unease. "They're not extending your tour thingy over there, are they?" I asked, as my worry ballooned into full-blown fear. I was no longer worried about if you'd come home to me. Now I was starting to wonder about when. No, your declaration quickly squashed my fear. "But we are being PCS'd, you said gingerly, to Fort Dickerson in Connecticut. I knew what that meant, permanent change of duty station. Since it was stateside, I figured the kids and I would get to tag along. By we, you mean all of us, right? I was hoping. Yes, sugar, I could practically hear you smiling, all of us. The fact that it might be cold as hell, not to mention loaded with snow when we arrived in January, none of that registered with me. All I could focus on was that we were all going to be together again. Well, I said, looking for the positives in moving to New England, a place I'd never been. But you'd be there for starters. That was enough motivation to get me thinking about packing. We'll be together, I said, then added. Plus, we'll be closer to your parents. Yes, we will. Your jovial laughter let me know that the carefree attitude I had donned solely for you was exactly what you needed from me. When I asked, starting to think about the possibilities of going somewhere new, where it'd be, what an adventure it would be. Soon, you said. Early January, you paused and added, the holidays will be chaotic for us. We'll need the house organized for the movers by then, which won't be conducive to family gatherings for the holidays, you said regretfully. You'll also need to call the TMO about moving, you said, of the transportation office on post. You need to contact housing to schedule a final walkthrough. Also check with housing at Fort Dickerson to see if we can get in. Otherwise, you'll need to see if we can reserve temporary housing on post until we can rent something off post. It's too hard for me to get a call through to you, much less. That's when I cut you off. I can handle everything to do with the move from here, babe. Don't you worry about a thing. You just take care of yourself, I said, then added, and hurry home to me. By the time Christmas rolled around, you'd been home a couple of months, and we were knee-deep in preparations to PCS to Connecticut in less than 2 weeks. I had some reservations about leaving Samantha and Alicia behind, but for the most part, I was really looking forward to whatever the next chapter of our lives had in store. I was also looking forward to having you in my bed at night. More often than not, for the next 3 years, until the Army PCS'd us to somewhere else. If I was lucky, it'd be a really long time before you got orders for another hardship tour. We'd opted to drive ourselves to Fort Dickerson, roughly a 25-hour drive, with a 3-day layover at your parents' in upstate New York over New Year's. Because we had 2 small children, we decided to break it up into several days. We left Fort Mitchell on the morning of December 27th. We were due at your parents' house on the 30th. While we headed north, Samantha and Alicia headed home to Willow Falls. Chapter 18. We arrived at Fort Dickerson on January 2nd, too late in the day to pick up the keys to the house we'd been lucky enough to get into on post, so we spent the night at the post hotel. Thankfully, this one was in better shape than the one we'd been forced to stay at right after we got married. For as much as I enjoyed the nicer hotel, I really wanted to get settled into our new home. The next morning, we went to the housing office where I waited in our SUV with the kids while you went inside to get the keys. While waiting for you to return, I wondered how many bedrooms our new house would have. Today's military families are fortunate to have the aid of the internet where they can go online and view the floor plans of the houses at their next post. Back then, before the internet, we did not have that luxury. So I was left to the time-tested method of guessing. I hoped there were at least 3 bedrooms. The boys could share a room, and I'd have another to use as a guest room. I knew my mother wouldn't stay away too long, and I was counting on Samantha and Alicia coming for lots of visits. You came back to the car, slid into the driver's seat, and handed me the house keys. "Did they tell you how many bedrooms we have?" I asked as you backed the car out of the parking space. "They said 4. You shifted into drive and glanced at me as we rolled through the parking lot. 2-story, 2-car garage. It's in newer housing, and it's a little bigger than the old place was back at Fort Mitchell." That sounded great. But I'd learned early on that if anything could go wrong, it was likely to go wrong for us. So I held my breath as we headed into the newer neighborhood. You maneuvered our SUV along scenic streets, following the direction of the housing office had given you. I blew out a sigh when you pulled into the driveway of 1231 Willow Oak Drive. The 2-story house with yellow siding and white shutters was very appealing to the senses. We went into the front door into an entryway. There was a coat closet and stairs on the left and a living room on the right. I hoped there was at least a powder room nearby for any new students I'd pick up here. Another living area toward the back of the house would also help. As we moved through the living room, there was a powder room on the right, and my heart did a little flip-flop, a restroom for my students. The foyer opened up into a huge room in front of us and to the right. On the left, a nice-sized kitchen. In the great room, there was plenty of space for a large dining table and a family room area on the right. On the other side of the kitchen was a laundry room that led into the garage. A covered patio set perched outside the 3-glass panel of sliding doors off the great room. I wandered through the house. Junior, who was 17 months now, was waddling along behind me. You carried Jason in your arms, following me and trying to appease Junior, who was starting to get upset because he wanted you to hold him. It wasn't like he had his fill of you while I was carrying Jason. You were gone for nearly all of it. There was plenty of storage upstairs and down. I had high hopes that I'd find the same thing upstairs. Extra storage is always a plus when you're a military family. At the bottom of the stairs, you handed me Jason and scooped up Junior. He was determined to get his way anyway. I wonder where he got that from. At the top of the stairs, the door to a common bathroom stood open. To the right of the bathroom was a bedroom that I decided to put the boys in. Once I learned our bedroom was behind it toward the front of the house. Our master suite was huge, with a big walk-in closet and a nice ensuite bathroom. To the left of the landing at the top of the stairs was a large area that we thought would be a perfect playroom for the kids. 2 more large bedrooms sat behind it at the back of the house. Wonderful. Plenty of room for family visits. I was already missing Samantha and Alicia. I couldn't wait for them to come visit. The only thing missing was the balcony off our bedroom at the old house. I was going to miss that, but considering that our bedroom was now facing the street, a balcony would have been far too tempting. At least back at Fort Mitchell, our balcony was masked mostly by the house's layout and the trees along Davy Pond. A few weeks later, we were settled in comfortably at Fort Dickerson. What was not to love? You were there with us. Captain Janney, your new company commander, was married, and thankfully his wife Barbara was active in the FRG. She was also Alpha Company's leading lady, a position I was more than happy to give up. Briefly, I wondered about the FRG and Echo Company back at Fort Mitchell. I hoped things were faring okay for them now that I was gone. Lieutenant Lee had been promoted into your old XO position. I was familiar with his wife, Pamela. She'd been eager to help while I was in charge of the Echo Company wives, so I felt confident in turning things over to her when we left. You weren't the XO at Fort Dickerson. Lieutenant Gelber had been promoted into that position before you got your orders back in the fall. Even though you were the same rank as Alpha Company's XO, you simply took command of a platoon in the company, something I viewed as a downgrade. But like you always say, I go where the Army needs me. You were happy with your new assignment in the Special Weapons Unit. You were soldiering, and it didn't matter what position you held. You had your rank, and that's all you cared about. Well, that and doing the job to the best of your ability. I am, and always have been, incredibly proud of you. During our first year at Fort Dickerson, there were numerous 2- and 3-week field maneuvers that took you away from us, but there were always 3- to 6-week intervals between each one, which to me was far better than you being gone an entire year all in one stint. By the time Christmas rolled around, I was making $300 to $400 a week teaching piano and voice lessons. So, all in all, our time at Fort Dickerson is filled with pleasant memories. Chapter 19. Just after the New Year, we'd been at Fort Dickerson for a year. You came home one day, right after I'd finished feeding the boys lunch. My first student of the afternoon wasn't due for another hour and a half. You passed by the boys. Junior was in his booster, and Jason, who was nearing 18 months, was in his high chair. The boys had always looked amazingly alike, save the eyes, and just like you. You kissed their heads. Junior climbed into your arms. You brought him with you as you came to kiss me. I took a plate I'd already prepared for you out of the refrigerator. I popped the corner on the lid and stuck it into the microwave. If you were on post, you always came home for lunch. You put Junior on the floor, then pulled the glass from the cabinet and went to the refrigerator to pour yourself a glass of iced tea. I have news, you said, as you poured. When your glass was full, you put the container back in the fridge and closed the door. You turned to look at me, then leaned against the counter before taking a sip of your tea. You look like the cat that ate the canary, I said with a hint of laughter. I picked Junior up, set him on the counter to clean his face and hands. What's going on? I asked cautiously, then put him back on the floor. I grabbed a couple more wipes and headed for Jason. You followed me but didn't say anything while I cleaned Jason's hands and face. When I was done, you moved him from his high chair to the floor. He clung to one of your legs while Junior climbed on the other. You paid them no mind. You were focused on me, as you said. Captain Janney is being promoted in PCS. Really, I said. It only took a couple of seconds for thoughts of who was going to run the company wives now to float to my head. I hoped the new captain was married, so I wouldn't be asked to head things up here too. I mean, I wouldn't mind doing it if you had the rank to support my being handed a job in the first place. I shoved my worries aside and asked, when? February, you said with a grin. That mean you're going to take over the XO position? I asked. You shook your head. Nope. I studied your face, wondering how you'd been passed over. If Lieutenant Gelber was being promoted to company commander, captain, I didn't see how anybody else could step into the XO position but you. I said grudgingly, Babe, you deserve that XO position. Nah, you shrugged and shook your head, as if it was nothing. I studied you hard now. This was not like you. I perched my hands on my hips. Do I need to go kick some ass? You draped your arms around my shoulders and said casually, Sugar, you gotta learn to lighten up. Lighten up? I was shocked. I'll admit it. You'd never talked so cavalierly about promotions before. Well, you glanced down into your glass of tea. Captains' wives don't generally run around posts kicking ass. Captain's wife, I said. It took a few seconds before it smacked me in the face. Captain? Holy shit! Devilishly, I asked, Are you telling me that I get to sleep with a captain now? Your grin was back. This time it spread clear across your face as you glanced up at me tantalizingly. Sweetheart, I wrapped my arms around you saying, I'm so proud of you. And then I began to wonder, but how? I know you're the best, but what about Lieutenant Gelber? He was, after all, the XO, basically the next in line. And that's the thing about the Army, you said. They have all these regulations, and one of them is that to be promoted to captain, you need a certain amount of time in as first lieutenant. Gelber hadn't had enough time as O2 to be eligible for another promotion yet. You're always very good, not to mention patient, about explaining the Army way of life to me. I was always grateful for that. Some wives weren't so lucky. You laughed jovially, saying, "We're on the fast track, darling." Back then, I really didn't know what that meant. But people always got really excited when talking about it, so I figured it had to be a good thing. My lack of understanding mattered little, though. Soon you would be the company commander, and I had no one else left to hand off the leading lady position to. But it was okay. I'd do it, and I'd do it with a smile. I was willing to do whatever it took to support you. Over the next year and a half, the kids grew, my side business thrived, and you continued to make a name for yourself in the Army. Life was good for us. Junior had just had his 4th birthday, and Jason's 3rd was coming up in a few weeks. We'd been trying for another baby for about a year now, but with no luck. Considering how quickly and easily we'd conceived the first 3 pregnancies, I was starting to think my baby-making days were over. The thought that we may never have a daughter made me sad.